Yo, yo.
Yo, hello,
Hello, hello.
Mr. Kesslive. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Fantastic. Got all the
Hello.
boys.
What's
Oh,
up?
Mr. Shambly and Preheat. How you guys doing?
Doing good, my man.
I want to get this up on the screen for. So thank you guys for just agreeing to do this. I mean, I don't think anybody has ever actually done like PvP slash like PvE, like bridging the gap. We kind of like have our like I guess like separate followings and do our own thing, but I think it's really important to, you know, get together to discuss all these topics because at the end of the day, like us as PvPers, we can scream all day long for things to change, but it really is the PvEers who get things done.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I feel like there's a lot of crossover, right? Like there's a lot of changes that they make, even though they may not officially say it, like that are for PvP or for PvE that affect both, right? Happens all the time. So it makes sense to kind of bring them together. But why don't we go ahead and do introductions just to start things off so everyone knows the voices and the people speaking.
Absolutely. So for the people who are watching Preheat stream, my name is JD. I'm a Devastation Evoker main for Arena specifically. I've hit 3K in Shuffle. I do a ton of content on YouTube. My channel is Coach JD, and my Twitch channel is JD underscore you dig. I'll pass it over to Shambly, who is the other Devastation Evoker guru when it comes to Arena.
Yeah, hey guys. I'm Shambly. I've been playing Devastation Evoker since beta. I got pretty into it early on there, and I've hit 3,300 in solo shuffle playing Devastation. I had the number one slot for a little while. I've been surpassed by Komodo Long. So if you're out there, Komodo Long, congratulations. Um, I've also gotten Gladiator with it in threes. My main's around 2,600 CR right now in threes. Um, and yeah, I'll pass it on to Cass, I guess.
Sounds good. I'm Caster. My stream is Kesslive. A lot of people know me as Lizzie McGuire.
That's such a good
Uh,
name.
that's my Evoker name. I started playing Evoker uh, actually because of Preheat. We did a beta key together. It was a Court of Stars, and he one-shot the impacts that run around.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And I was like, that's a lot of damage, and that looks fun. So I started playing it the moment it came onto live, and I've been playing it since. Mostly Mythic Plus and Raid. Um, I found quite a bit of success with it in keys over the season. And I tried solo shuffle a
And
lot. I'm Let's put it this way, okay? I got about 2,000 games in solo shuffle,
uh-huh.
and I didn't hit elite on my evoker. I played 75 games on my rep pally, and I hit elite. So I'm really bad at evoker and
Classic.
PvP.
It happens, it's not Shambly can attest to this. It is the most difficult spec in the game to play in Arena, period, hands down. There's no question. And we're
I
gonna talk
hit
about all of
20
that.
I hit 2360 and then that just kept tanking. It was so frustrating.
It is extremely difficult to play as 25 yards versus every other
Yes.
caster that is 40. And even shamans, all their stuff is generally 30 yards. So it's very difficult. So that's why I wanted to get this group together to talk about everything that has like really transpired since beta, because everyone in here played it in beta, right? I got kind of sick of mage, and I was like, I've never been able to play on a release of a new class, and so I was like, I'll just do it. And so when I started messing with it, I mean, it was rough. Can you guys? I mean, was it not rough for you? It was rough. Just getting to like the functionality of it and how it worked with the whole 25 yards thing. And but yeah, we'll go over all that. So you guys want to go over the 10.1 recap changes? Definitely want to say hats off to the PvE guys on the forums who came out of the shadows on the causality change, which was much needed, I would
Oh yeah.
say. And it feels a ton better. I mean, I know Kesslive sent a screenshot the other day. He got a 50-second time on his Dragon Rage for the extension, right?
Yeah, the new Dragon Rage, especially in AoE, feels, pretty similar to live. Consistently getting 50 seconds all the time is very good, right? It gives you something to chase after again. The causality change is very good, and I'm a big fan of it. However, I still wish that there would be one more change towards the bottom. Like, if you look at where causality is and how you get to it, right, you have to put 2 into Titanic Wrath.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I'm not a big fan of that. I really like Titanic Wrath in single target situations, but in AoE, especially if you play Imminent Destruction, it kind of devalues the talent entirely, right? Because you're mostly just spamming Pyre, especially in that 10-second window. If you're playing Imminent, right, you're gonna have no Essence Bursts. You're just Pyre, 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 Pyre. So it creates some weird scenarios. It's also 2 points, which still doesn't feel great. I wish they would make, like, if you look at Font of Magic and Hoarded Power, if they connected those to causality in like a triangle, like just put a line down each way, so that you could at least make the choice whether you want to invest 2 points into Titanic Wrath or kind of go around it and dodge it. I think that would be a good change, although maybe I'm being picky there.
I think it is funny that they took the talent that we most often either skip on or pick. It's like the most, I guess you could say it's like, in terms of builds, it's controversial in the sense that there's a lot of picking or not picking, right? On that talent, it gets a lot of activity. I think it's funny that they forced us to take it.
Yeah, no, it's when I play it or I take it, it's just like a little bit anti-synergistic, a little bit, not entirely, but because there are instances where you got Dragon Rage up and you want to keep getting your extension, right? But you don't have any Essence Burst procs. Now you have to like think about it to yourself. Okay, do I want to just like, I don't know, Azure Strike just for the Essence Burst proc, just for the increased damage, or do I want to just keep channeling Disintegrate to get that extended or faster extension? So it's a little, to me, it's a little bit of anti-synergy there, but as an Evoker main since beta and day one, I mean, like, we take the small dubs here. Like, this is a huge monumental. We hear radio silence for months on end, and then finally, after everybody's screaming for the longest time, they make a change. But yeah, a little bit anti-synergistic. And on your Kess's point of Imminent Destruction, I mean, in Arena, I'm never gonna really be able to take this. Like, I don't even know if it would be good for you in dungeons either. I mean, especially since my favorite talent in this is Arcane Vigor, which gives you an Essence Burst proc after Shouting Burst.
Yeah.
That feels so good.
I love that talent.
It's
so
great. Like, odds of mad.
It's kind of interesting, the whole, I don't want to open a can of worms with the whole like clipping debate, but whenever you were looking at like the older iteration, or I guess the live iteration of Feed the Flames, where you're getting that cooldown reduction based on consuming an Essence Burst proc. We previously, outside of Dragon Rage, had no way to force an Essence Burst, which I've always found to be kind of a design flaw with the spec, because I mean you have so many talents: Titanic Wrath, Feed the Flames. I think there's a couple other ones on there. I don't want to like just start fishing for names off the top of my head, but there so much of the spec is kind of built around this idea of building and consuming Essence Bursts, but we just didn't have a way to reliably generate one. It was entirely RNG outside of Dragon Rage, and I think just that one talent point in Arcane Vigor, it really feels like it's added something to the spec that it's been missing, and it's really, really nice.
I have a question for the PvE gurus, because I know Preheat, you've been a fire mage forever. I don't know, Kess, your background. What were you before you made Devastation?
I've kind of played everything. Mm-hmm. You could almost call me a Fodom reroller.
Okay.
I love Mythic Plus, so I tend to gravitate towards what's good. But I think most people have known me as Demon Hunter / Hunter.
Okay. Well, my question is, for the most part, each and every DPS spec has a specific way, a structured way that their damage can function to build up towards something, right? Whether it be their build up and then their spenders. What I find very disheartening about this spec is that it is all RNG outside of just popping your cooldown. There's no way to guarantee that you can get to your either essence burst or your spenders. You just have to sit and wait. What do you guys comments on that?
So I'd say like when it comes to like AoE, especially Mythic Plus, depending on your talents, there's definitely a lot of ways you can bank damage between pulls. So it's probably a lot different given that it's PvP versus this. But most of that's just like increasing your target count, right? Stuff like banking Leaping Flames and then having like Scarlet Adaptation fully revved up for the next pull. If you're running Charge Blast, having Charge Blast ready for the next pull, and then obviously having your resources. But yeah, I could see that like in single target. Yeah, there's not really any way to kind of bank the charges other than just like I guess ignoring your procs, which would be weird, right?
Yeah. It's just strange to me that like every other spec, even Fire Mage or even like Shadow Praise, you're building up, you're working up towards something. Fire Mage is a little bit different because you're a little bit more, I guess, dependent on the procs, but you can manipulate how it works to work in your favor, if that makes sense. But this is just like you either Azure Strike or Living Flame, and that's how you get an Essence Burst. And you default start with the 6 Essence if you take that talent.
I mean, I think in PvP, what's weird with it is that so much of Disintegrate's damage is tied to scintillation procs. I mean, in PvP, like you're looking at burst damage windows rather than kind of an overall damage profile. Like you can do the most damage in the game, and if you have like a healer free casting on the enemy team, or there is some kind of mitigation up, it doesn't really matter. It's a lot of pad damage, right? And with scintillation, you can just lottery proc 5 disintegrate.
That's exactly what I would call it, a lottery
in a row, and blow somebody up for kind of no reason. Or you can disintegrate twice and kind of just do no damage, which is sort of weird. And I know that with the reworked talents, with moving causality to the bottom and making scintillation a capstone as well. I feel like it's nice that we have this kind of it's nice that the tree's been opened up in the way that it has, but I'm curious to get the PvEers thoughts on this, but I feel like the choices are still kind of limited because I feel like you are just going to be forced into taking causality and scintillation in every scenario, so you don't really have a ton of choice.
Yeah, you're gonna be forced into those two. There's only one scenario where you wouldn't go scintillation, which is like council on the current raid, right? If there's like 4 bosses the whole time, that would be like the only situation where you're just like straight up not pressing disintegrate. I still think it's just such an improvement though over the previous design, just because it kind of is the same way right now, except for the capstones just aren't really impactful at all, right? Like we still have to get scintillation, we still have to get feed the flames. It's just that like everything else is just like less important, so there's like less competition, I guess.
Yeah, definitely an upgrade. Still definitely an upgrade.
I really wish they would change something with iridescence. I mean, that window is too small, and it's behind Power Swell, which is just useless. I swear it doesn't even work. I don't know. I've never felt the power of that talent ever.
For being called Power Swell, it sure feels fucking weak, dude.
I'm glad that they moved it to a 1-pointer, but still, man, like, I don't know. I would love to see it. 10-second windows, especially in Arena, is incredibly short. Like, what happens if you get stunned for 6 seconds? Like,
it's short for everyone. Yeah, I mean, the window on the iridescence is just, it makes no sense too for it to be that short, right? Like, since the cooldown on both of those spells, both empowers, is like way longer than 10 seconds, right? On average, it's like 22 now, 24, somewhere in that range. So it doesn't really make sense for it to be a 10-second. And it's just arbitrary too. Like, it wouldn't make us overpowered in any way if it was longer. It would just make it quality of life better, right? I think 10 was just a number they chose just because it's like a nice round number, right? I don't think they actually thought through what 10 seconds actually means.
Possibly. I feel like the real big winner here for this tree is really, I guess, the AoE and the causality thing. So I mean, I know Kess, you were tested that you almost got it to be like 1 million damage on the PTR because of the set bonus being buffed by other people. But I feel like that's going to be, has it felt strong to you? Have you tested it extensively in Mythic Plus?
Yeah, I did a fair bit of keys over the weekend, and I don't know how you guys feel about the overall like organization of the new tree, but it's probably a lot different for key players. But Preheat, maybe you can say something on this too. But like in Mythic Plus, I feel like now I have to make more decisions, like very meaningful decisions, than I have to on live right now. Like the organization is quite weird. I feel like they want to push this Firestorm build on us.
But we just
I don't
can't
know
get it.
how we can't get it. You have to take engulfing, which feels terrible. Like if they added a straight line down from volatility, that would be amazing. And then like the practicality of that build is in a lot of situations not very realistic, right? Like I was messing around too with like a Firestorm ever burning flame build
Mm.
where you're just max rank fire breathing all the time, you're firestorming and then you're pyring to keep that max rank dot up. And when you're sitting at a target dummy on 5 targets, that build was doing more damage than anything I could come up with.
So you're
But
saying it's awkward
then,
because you're locked to points, or?
yeah, like you don't have much flexibility. If you
Mm.
go the firestorm route,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, I kind of had 2 talent points that I could freely move. And it was a matter of, am I playing Feed the Flames build, so going Imminent Destruction and Feed the Flames, or am I going down Font of Magic and Ever-Burning Flame?
Right.
And those are like the only 2 talent points I had to switch if I played Firestorm. Now, if you go to the right side of the tree and you don't take Firestorm, I think you have a lot more flexibility, a lot more creativity over there, and that feels good. But I feel like they're trying to push this Firestorm build because they keep changing the ability, they keep reworking that side. They've buffed it, I think, once or twice now. But it doesn't feel great in terms of like the organization of the tree and how you have to get the abilities.
I've never had that Firestorm ability do any damage at all.
It well, yes, it does no damage. Uh, like even right now on live, if you go do Algathar Academy, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
big pole dungeon, it'll end up doing about as much as Azure Strike over the whole key.
Oh,
Yeah,
God.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask, just out of curiosity, whether, just let's just assume that there was no like talent point debacle where you had to kind of, pull from other things to pick it up. Like, how does it feel to you guys, like, as a button? I mean, obviously in PvP, it's not a not a very useful spell in general, but
The
even in the dungeons and stuff that I've done, it just doesn't feel good to use. It feels awkward to me.
It is definitely awkward when you're in your cooldowns, like especially with the new design, right? You would be pressing Firestorm in Dragon Rage to buff your pyres. And
mm,
that casted spell in Dragon Rage feels very bad.
right.
Like really bad. You can hover and cast it, cool, but that just feels really bad. Like putting anything or any globals into anything other than like Pyre, Disintegrate, or your Empowereds feels bad, right? Because it's a pretty short window and we're chasing extensions, right? So dropping Firestorm and Dragon Rage to me feels pretty bad. Um, Outside of cooldowns with Raging Inferno, it feels a lot better now because you at least you're getting a buff out of it.
Mm.
But if you go back a step and you go to live, like it just doesn't feel good in any situation. It's to me, it's every time I press it, I'm sad, you know.
It's a long cast. I mean,
Yeah.
we can't get any
Yeah.
value out of that, really.
So there was almost a dark timeline where Firestorm was going to be required for single target. Like there was a while in beta where Everburning Flame was like the best single target build by a lot, and like you had to use Firestorm to keep it up. But yeah, just to echo what Kes said, like that ability just sucks. Like no one wants to press it. The new version of it actually kind of feels good outside the cooldowns, but only outside the cooldowns.
Yeah.
But you give up too much to get it, right? Like the opportunity cost on the talents is just way too high. You can't really justify picking it because there's just like way better shit to pick up, it feels like. And like realistically speaking, most tanks are just going to pull out of it anyways, right? Like even when it was bigger, whenever it was like the 50% increase with Raging Inferno, before they nerfed it down to 25 for some reason, even then like tanks will still pull out of it, right? So I don't know, unless you're playing with like a DK or something where it's like very telegraphed where they're going to have the mobs because they're D&D. I feel like Raging Inferno is just like a hassle, and it's really not worth the hassle, right? It's like you look at the end of the dungeon, right, and it's doing like 4% of your damage or something, and really the main benefit's just a 20% increased damage on Pyre, but like still you're not even really getting much out of that anyways. It's like the initial hit in your cooldowns, and then you probably don't want to re-up it during your cooldowns, and yeah, I don't know. It just feels like bad all around.
I feel like this would
Actually-
function better if it was like Flame Strike, right? Maybe it's a cost 3 essence and you just drop it. It was instant cast, not 2-second cast, right? You just drop it. I feel like that'd be way better. make a lot more sense.
Yeah, if there was just like any way, so obviously like Snapfire is how you make it instant, right? But here's the problem: it works off of Living Flame, right?
Mhm.
There's no Azure Strike in there, so like the one side where it's like, oh well, maybe we would use it for this reason. The fact that it does not include our AOE ability when it is an AOE ability itself, kind of doesn't really make sense to begin with,
Super
right?
low
Like,
proc rate too.
yeah, low proc rate, pretty much only procs if you have Leaping Flames. Like that's the only time it procs.
Yeah, so you end up playing 2 lotteries in one build, right? You need, what is burnout now? 15% chance, I think, right?
16.
16?
Mhm.
So you have a 16% chance to get a free living flame, and then off that free living flame you have a 12% chance. So it's just like the full Gamba build, and even when you hit the lottery, you're not rewarded.
Yeah, it's like the lottery. You hit the lottery and pennies start flying out. You're like, oh yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Like,
I've said the lottery so many times when playing the spec or just gambling. It just feels terrible. Like to have all my shit be RNG is terrible.
The one
You know,
last
it's
thing,
sorry, go ahead.
the one last thing I want to say on Firestorm that Preheat kind of just mentioned was I used to always tell myself too, like even in the PTR keys that I was doing, that yeah, like Firestorm's gonna really suck in a pug environment, but in a controlled group, it might be pretty good. And then I went and played like controlled groups, tank and comms, everything, and it still just sucks. Like the way the game works, the way affixes work, the way dungeon mobs work, it just doesn't allow for you to get full value out of the ability. Like you stand there, you hard cast it, you drop it, and then
That's it.
you get a sanguine puddle. Dragonflight has a million swirly mechanics on the floor
Yep.
that just requires so much movement, and it's just not realistic. Same thing with like I said, on a target dummy, the ever burning flame build was looking so nice, like it was beautiful. But then now you add any sort of movement or like any variable to the rotation, and it's just like you're at risk of losing value, right?
Yeah,
So
I
the
did two
left-
keys like that the other day. I'm not a Mythic Pluser like that. I did 16 and 17 the other day for the Primal Focus, upgrade the gear, and there was a zillion. I had to move so much. There's no
Yeah.
instance I'm standing still for like more than a second.
yeah,
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 y'all have mentioned like the cast times a couple of times, and engulfing blaze and stuff. And one thing that like really just stands out to me with Evoker is kind of a design flaw, and just something that I was hoping would be addressed more in 10.1, is that I mean, like Firestorm is a 2-second cast. The Engulfing Blades adds cast time to Living Flame, which is already a 2-second cast. Disintegrate is kind of a slow channel. I mean, not only does it make the spec feel kind of low APM outside of, like haste increasing effects, but it's also just it really slows down the gameplay and makes it feel bad when there's movement. I mean, in PvP you have to deal with kicks, right? Like the new PvP talent they added, Dreamcatcher, and also increases the cast time on Sleepwalk. In exchange for removing the cooldown, makes it a 2-second cast. Like everything is like a 2+ second cast, and it just, man, it feels really bad, especially because I mean, in PvP you're kind of like pigeonholed into first mastery, so you have like 1% haste, and it does not feel good, man.
What's the
Yeah.
normal mastery level you guys run in PvE?
Oh, so like we're at 100 or
Really?
close to it, and then in the patch we're going to be probably pushing towards like 125 or 130. So we're going to be really, really, really high on mastery.
I mean,
Yeah.
in arena, if you go anything less than 70, you're just not even you're tickling damage. Basically,
Yep.
you're not scary at all. It's just like, and being 25 yards on top of that, it's just like no one treats you as a threat, no one respects you, and you're not even doing any meaningful damage. So I can see how that can
Well, so
100% good for you.
So I don't really PvP much, but like when the expansion first came out, I was like war mode on the whole time, and I had a lot of fun PvPing out in the world, just because like there'd be a lot of situations where it's like you're getting your like cash that's dropping, right, and a bunch of people are like stuck in a small group, right, a bunch of alliance, you fucking sneak up on them, hit them with the Dragon Rage, tip the scales, Fire Breath, right, and like one shot people, and obviously they ended up nerfing that and buffing Disintegrate to try and like kind of rebalance how Evoker PvP works, but I feel like there's a fundamental flaw with how we deal damage, especially in PvP, and I don't really PvP much, so maybe you can give me more insights on this, but I feel like having us spend a resource on a spell that is very slow and if it gets interrupted, it just doesn't refund anything, right? Like you lose all the potential damage it could do. I feel like that just makes Evoker very easy to shut down.
Yep, Shambly, I'm gonna let you cook right now. Go for it.
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, I have like a stop casting button bound specifically so that I can juke on disintegrates during hover and things like that. And it's such like a like such a small victory. It's like the smallest victory you can possibly imagine to juke someone on kicking disintegrate because you're like, aha, now I can cast it, but only one time because I already spent 3 of my essence. Um, and so like that feels really really bad. All of the casts are really long. The damage feels very telegraphed and easy to shut down. And kind of to your point about the mastery, too. I mean, I think that it's kind of a balancing nightmare in PvP. I know there are frustrations with it that I've read about that you know people have expressed in PvE as well, where you know the execute phase of a boss is the most difficult part, and you know you're doing essentially the lowest damage there outside of Dragon Rage windows. But in PvP, it feels like you absolutely have to have that maximum mastery value to be able to get a kill. Your damage is easy to shut down, and everyone understands how it works at this point, right? Like earlier in the expansion, when the class was new, you could kind of just meme people, and they would be like, "Oh, what did that dragon just do to me?" and now you know everybody knows what the dragon's about to do to you, and they use a defensive. They a lot of people position very carefully, so they're not stacking up to avoid the cleave damage, and it just makes life really difficult. And disintegrate is not doing that any favors. I think it would be really, really nice if we had some kind of alternative to disintegrate in PvP. I would also just take you know tick by tick essence consumption to make the kicks less punishing. I mean, even if you know outside of like nullifying shroud, even if you avoid a kick, you know there's stuns, there's CCs, and you just lose your essence so fast and get no damage out. And then you end up being entirely reliant on these like windows where you have an eternity surge into like a burnout proc with Scarlet Adaptation stacked, and you just back to back those into a Shining Star, and you just randomly one shot somebody, and you know that's like good for a laugh here and there, but I don't think it's super healthy for the game, and it's definitely not fun for people to play against.
I can think of no other spec, I think, in the game where you spend or you spend if you get kicked, you don't lose the resources that enabled you to cast it in the first place. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, it's unique because it's a channeled ability.
Like even what about like Shadow Priest Mind Flay? You know, like if they get kicked on Mind Flay, they don't lose the insanity
Yeah,
Well,
like
so-
you kick a chaos bolt, they keep the shards.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is that what you're trying to say?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. That's very strange to me.
I think it's just got to be because it's new, right? Like there's no way that like this is just the evoker design is specifically unique in this way, and they mean for it to be that way, right? Like I feel
Right.
like there's got to be something that maybe hasn't clicked yet because it's a new class. But yeah, I agree. It's weird. Like why the hell would you lose your resource? I get that like we have a disintegrate, like a channeled spender, and that's like a unique thing, right? But like they gotta rethink how they're gonna have it work if you get kicked if they're gonna keep it this way.
That's I could not agree more. I mean, it really does feel bad, especially when you guys talk about in the mythic environment, having to just have a channel that's your damage spender, your highest damaging ability. You have to stand there and cast it unless you have hovers up, right? But then you have to move out of swirlies, and then there's rep pallies on you, and you know you can't just stand there and cast it. So yeah, I really would like to see it be moved to something different. But that kind of opens the door for the next kind of topic here for this segment is the third spec. Are you guys fully down with the conspiracy theories out there on a third spec?
I think there's like a two-part answer to this. My immediate answer is no.
You think it's a
Simply
bait?
because I don't think it'll be something that happens anytime soon. Like there's just no way they release a third spec with like you would need so much testing for that, right? Like
Sure.
that would have to be on PTR for many cycles. It would need a lot of testing. Like look how long we got to test this class, and you know it released with so many bugs. We still have bugs. they would have to put so much time into a third spec. It's not like I've seen people out there be like, "Oh, we killed the last boss and you unlock the third spec," or you do a quest line, you get the third spec. It's like that's not going to happen. That's not realistic. There needs to be a lot of testing and stuff. So my immediate answer is no, but either in a future patch, this expansion, or next expansion, yes, I can see it.
Preheat, your
This
thoughts?
is where I'm at.
So like so yeah, I agree 100% with Kess. Like there's just like no way in 10.1 we get a new spec.
Yeah.
But that being said, I would love to be wrong, right? Because like getting a new spec would be sick, right? Like I think the possibilities of a new spec are amazing. Like I don't know about it being like a support spec. I hope it's more like a tanking spec. Like that's, to me, that seems like more in line with augmentation, right? Is like having it be like the Black Dragon's power, and you're using, you know, defensive abilities, and kind of going with like Sarkath. If you've looked at the new in boss in the dungeon journal, like he's a Devastation Evoker, right? So like all his abilities are like basically souped up versions of what we have, and they're actually pretty sick. But I would love to see like a new flavor of Evoker, right? I just love playing Evoker in general, and like I hate healing, so I don't want to play Preservation. So having another spec that's not Preservation would be a huge win for me. That being said, what I think it actually is, either one of two things, right? Either they were working on it, and then like in the very beginning, right, and like some pieces, some crumbs were like left over, maybe unintentionally, or it could be something like the Warlock Green Flame, right, where it's like you get an item. There was an interview. It was the EU content creator interview. Specifically, Ian Hazakasas said that there's an item that we care about that the last boss is going to have for us, right? He said this: evokers will be interested in an item that drops off the last boss. But they also said it wasn't going to be the staff. Like this was in the same question where someone was asking about if there's going to be a new evoker staff, and he would basically said there's no new evoker staff. However, evokers will be interested in the item that drops off the last boss. So they're definitely teasing that there's something there. I think it's way more likely that it's just like Shadow Flame.
Okay, that kind of makes sense, actually.
Yeah.
Shambly, are you buying buying the sauce?
I'm in agreement with everything that Preheat and Kess just said. I mean, I think that the odds of us getting a new spec in 10.1 are approximately 0%. I think that they might be like kind of paving the way for it, you know, maybe in later in the expansion, or even for next expansion, or you know, what have you. I think that, you know, there's a strong possibility as well that it's just a kind of a story component. You know, this is part of the narrative, and you know, whatever this, you know, augmentation thing actually winds up being, it's, you know, it's something that has to do with the story of the Drakthir, and where they're going and where they've been, and you know, how all that history sort of intertwines with what's going on currently in Dragonflight. I don't think that it's going to be a new spec anytime soon.
Right, yeah. The best conspiracy theory that I saw on the forums was that someone said, hey, listen, the next spec isn't coming out because the lore is just not there yet. I thought that was hilarious.
I mean, they'd also have to like rework the entirety of the class tree if they added a new spec. Right?
I wish they would. We need help defensively. Damn.
Yeah, for real.
That's one of our topics today. Since we brought it up, I mean, how do you guys feel? How does it? We all know how it works in PvP, defensively. In the PvE realm, there are certain things that you can kind of predict. You know what's coming, but even if you do know that it's coming, how do you guys feel that it is in Mythic and rating content defensively? Is it strong, weak? And it's got to be weak.
Well, in my opinion, like you said, if you understand the damage patterns and you know what's coming, right? It's expected damage. The class feels pretty good, in my opinion. Especially in the key scene, there's only, I would say there's two bosses that, as I got into like the higher keys, became pretty frustrating on this class. One of them being Vexmus. I think Vexmus is Evoker's worst nightmare. Because it's just constant damage, like every 20 seconds, right? And you like defensive, you can Renewing Blaze one, and then after that you rely on healer cooldowns, externals, or you have to self-heal on like health pot and stuff like that. But that's the only fight I really have a problem with. Croth can sometimes be a bit awkward, right? It's a stacking debuff you get. Most groups, until you get to a high key where the boss is very long, will do 4 stacks. But then you start getting into keys where you kind of need to do 5 stacks um, to kill the boss in an efficient way, and you just like can't do that on Evoker without like very extensive help from other people, and that situation doesn't feel great. But like I said, only those 2 bosses were an issue for me this season. Every other boss, like when you know the damage is coming, this, in my opinion, it feels pretty good. Like the 30% wall is good. Renewing Blaze in a Mythic Plus scenario is actually like insanely broken. You are very self-sufficient.
I
and
think
it
you
feels
wouldn't feel that
amazing.
way if you had healing reduction on it consistently.
Yeah, that.
Like if you got
Last thing
sharpened
I'll
or
say though is the Broodkeeper ring does help fill some gaps. Like if I recognize it's up, like I track it and everything.
Mhm.
If I recognize it's up and it's a full shield, uh, it helps me. I can hold a cooldown or I can hold something, right? Just because I know from the damage pattern how much I'm going to be taking, all that, and it'll be enough for me to live in some situations. So losing that, I definitely think evokers will feel it, and that kind of worries me a little bit.
I've always thought that the passive tempered scales that's supposedly 75% increased armor has just not been coded properly. That's my personal take on it. I don't know. Preheat, you gotta let me know. How are you
So-
dead? Are you dead? Like,
Oh, I'm so like, yeah, if you know damage is coming, like if I know when the thing is going to happen, I feel very strong. In fact, I feel like one of the strongest, right? Like,
Yeah.
obviously we don't have immunity, but like in terms of classes that aren't immuning, like I can deal with a big damage event that I know is coming better than probably most. And in fact, if I'm good at a fight, like usually I'm one of the last ones alive in it. Even in raid, like I'll be like the last person even after the tank dies. And
I
it's
agree.
because the defensives are so good in that scenario, right? But yeah, like anything that's random, anything like a cast going off where like someone doesn't interrupt it, probably gonna die to that, right? Like think like Ruby Life Pulse, right? And you're doing like the whole gambit around and before the second to last boss, you get hit by like a random cinder hit and it's probably death, right? Especially if you have the debuff and you're about to have Infernal go off. So like there's a lot of scenarios where Evoker just feels kind of helpless, or I feel like I'm just at the mercy of my healer. But then there's also situations where I feel incredibly strong. So I'd say it's like a feast or famine kind of situation, right? Like, and really the main issue with it is that we don't have like a nice short extra button, like a blazing barrier, right? Like for fire mage, like if we
Right.
just had like a small absorb shield that we could just like press, or something else, some other defensive that was like relatively short, right? Because all of our defensives are like they're kind of in the longer range, I guess. Like Renewing Blaze is really fucking good. Like it's probably one of the most OP buttons ever, and people just like don't really use it all that much, I've noticed. But like Renewing Blaze is insane, right? But the problem is it doesn't keep you from getting one shot, right?
Right.
Like as long as you can survive the first 2 ticks of something like Herja Shield, Renewing Blaze, which is up for every single one of them, like you're just impossible to kill, right? But anytime that there's like a big hit, right, then it, or just like sporadic damage that's gonna probably global you, like you have to use like Verdant Embrace or Emerald Blossom, and like relying on Panacea for fucking healing is
Yeah.
you're down bad, right? Like you're down real bad if that's the situation. So overall, I mean, it's almost there. I think honestly, there's 2 ways to fix it, right? Add a small button that is like a small absorb shield or like small 10% damage reduction, something like that, right? 30-second cooldown. Add that, or add like all the melee, right? Since we're kind of like melee, right? All the melee and like BM hunters have like passive leech built into their tree. I feel like if we had like a really good passive leech node that was like maybe paired with Draconic Legacy or something else that's defensive in there, if we just got like 5 or 10% leech for free, I feel like a lot of the pain and suffering would be alleviated. And also big retweet on the ring. Like once I got Broodkeeper's ring, my deaths on Rezaget progression Mythic just went like literally they just eclipsed. Like that ring is so good, and I'm actually terrified to unequip it.
How much
like,
is
I
the
feel
shield
like
for?
I can't. So the shield on the ring is for, let's see, 64,000 damage. It's not even that much. It's a pretty
It's-
small shield.
It's
Yeah.
halved in arena.
It's interesting that you mentioned that like random damage component too, because that's how I feel a lot of times in PvP. I mean, there are definitely also times like I was in a match the other day where I had Obsidian Scales and Renewing Blaze active, and I was at like I don't know 65-70% my health, and I told my healer I was like, oh, I'm fine, and then I died literally 1 second later. But it definitely feels really bad because of that random element, which in PvP is very prevalent, right? Because it's like, okay, maybe you even know there's damage coming, but is that damage gonna crit? Is it gonna proc, this whatever class effect? Like we'll take Ret Paladins for example, because they've kind of the scourge of 10.0.7 in arenas. So it could be just a regular Templar's Verdict. It could be a Templar's Verdict that also procs a Divine Storm. It could be a Templar's Verdict that also procs a Divine Storm and also procs a Divine Arbiter. It could be a Templar's Verdict that also procs a Divine Storm that also procs a Divine Arbiter that also Execution Sentence is going to hit you pretty soon. And so like depending on what's happening there, it could be like it could either be like, oh, I'm pretty okay, or I just died through my wall, it doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
So the defensives feel pretty weak in PvP. I think that overall our survivability is like okay if you trade perfectly, but it's kind of a I don't know. It's kind of a complex equation because survivability is part of it is mobility, part of it is your active defensives, part of it is your passive defensives. I definitely agree with you, Preheat, that I would love to see actually our passive tankiness like brought up a little bit, whether through elite shield or damage reduction.
Soul Leech.
Soul Leech,
please. I want it.
I think that the class tree could really use some rework. Like, I mean, one of my favorite comparisons when I'm kind of talking about some of those passive tankiness talents is if you look at like Draconic Legacy in the class tree where you invest 2 points and you get 6% stamina. Like the Paladin rework that just happened, right? They have a talent that's in roughly the same position in the class tree. It's also 2 points, and instead of getting 6% stamina, they get 10% stamina, 20% armor, and 10% of wins.
Yeah,
so
and
you get everything.
And it used to be a 1 point or 2 before that.
Yeah,
so it's incredible the resources they put towards that. I can't even believe it.
Yeah, our class tree just it feels a little underwhelming. Like there's a lot of good stuff in there, especially towards the bottom, but there's a lot of very weak kind of filler talents that I would love to see buffed up and made more meaningful.
I really hope that side is next. I mean, they did a pretty okay job with making sure that the PV or the PvE side of it just functions more fluidly, but I'm really hoping to see a complete, also like kind of reworked in this bottom section of this left side. I mean, there's just too many passive talents. Like, how many points are there for hover on this thing? It's ridiculous. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, you're spending so many points for your basic class. How it, you know what I mean? I don't see any mages talenting into Blink on their tree. You know what I mean? It just feels really bad to have all those points just eaten up by just the pure design of how the class is supposed to be, no?
I think, like, when I take a look at what they're doing this expansion, right? Like, you look at Ret Pal, you look at Shadow Priest every week, stuff like that, and then you take the first version of Evoker, and then I always think to myself, is like, I'm really excited for when they one day get up and say, hey, we're going to rework Evoker, And they kind of already had, like you said, on the PvE side, but I feel like they will one day on that side, and like I'm really excited for it. I think it could be like super awesome.
I really truly feel that I don't know, you guys are all, I was all over the forums too in the beta because I was really excited and I was sifting through all the replies, and a lot of the people actually were saying, hey, we're down for like the whole 25-yard range fantasy thing. We're cool with that. But like, what is going to be given to us as far as like a tool set to be able to operate in that space? Because I can't imagine, outside of controlled groups and Mythic Plus and Raid, I can only imagine how much of a nightmare it is for a Devastation Evoker to try and perform well with your mastery, pulling aggro immediately, with your 25-yard range, with everybody running all over the place. It's got to be an absolute nightmare for you.
Aggro is a huge issue, and the fact that we're just getting like more and more burst, right, with like our new tier bonus, obviously with the new talents. I appreciate having more AoE damage. However, I'm also fearful because it's a very slight margin, right? For a lot of people, they don't even know this fact. If you're in melee range, you actually have a lower threshold to pull aggro than if you're in quote unquote ranged, right? And obviously that distance varies depending on like the mob type, right? But like in general, we don't really have much room to operate in, right? Like we're basically working with the small sliver, and pulling threat is a huge issue. I've literally pulled threat and freehold on 10.1 after a warrior's AoE taunt ended, and they weren't doing bad damage. Like they did the first pull, right, which is like the big one, and you pop plus and you go ham with everything, and like he AoE taunts, he's doing like 80k DPS, right, which is like okay for just like some pug, and literally as soon as his AoE taunt is over, like all the mobs turn to me, and I'm just like, how is this supposed to work, right? Like if you design a class and the whole fantasy is that you hit hard at the start, right? Like you're supposed to take down giants, we do more damage at the start. It's the whole thing, right? And then you're like, oh, but also you have to wait on aggro. It defeats the purpose, right? It just doesn't make sense.
I couldn't agree more. I never, even in arena, I mean, the mastery on the top end doesn't mean anything other than just more damage, pure raw damage for us. But where we really tend to see the suffering is when people are low. It is incredibly difficult to finish off a target by yourself, really, unless you hit the slot machine lottery with like scintillation procs, whatever. But like, I feel like just because if I create the conditions necessary for a kill window and I play properly and I, bait cooldowns and then I create these windows, I don't feel like it's good for the game or as a design really spec flaw that I do less damage just because they are lower on health. That to me just does not make sense.
It feels like you kill them from like half health, or you don't kill them at all.
Yeah, and I mean I've heard this, the cries in the forums for like it just feels it's gotta feel terrible especially in a raid environment where the hardest part of the fight has always been historically the execute phase, and you're just doing less damage because of who you are. I mean that's gotta feel terrible.
Yeah, I mean, so like in like a world first setting, whenever you're like setting the comp for it, right? Like it's a huge liability. Like if I was setting the comp for world first progression and I was like choosing like which class to put in as like the last DPS slot, obviously you have a lot of benefits as Evoker, especially if preservation isn't being brought, because you got stuff like time spiral and rescue, and if the fight demands it, then obviously you need to bring that stuff, right? Especially for priests. But you're also looking at it like, okay, but they're also doing tank damage in execute, right? So is execute, is it viable, right? Like in Rizageth, for example, right? Like the fight got nerfed basically right before the world first kill. In fact, the pull before, and they added like a whole extra minute to the last phase. So like the last phase was no longer an issue. However, leading up into that point, right? Like when all of progression was happening, it was extremely tight, right? So like going into that boss, had they not nerfed it, like you just couldn't really play Evoker at all on it, right? And this is why like basically no one even considered Devastation, because if it's a tight execute, it's just not going to happen for you, right? Like you don't ever stop damage and execute. You always stop damage in P1. This is just like a thing, right? Like, so having more P1 damage is kind of irrelevant. And I think the best way to fix this, honestly, is to make it so that our mastery works a little bit differently outside of Dragon Rage. Make it so that the high end and the low end are maybe, pushed closer to each other, right? So there's like a bottom to it, as opposed to going all the way down to zero, because it's just the delta is too large. Like it's just too big of a gap.
Right. I've seen some comments on the forums saying that, maybe Essence Burst should be affected by Mastery. So if you get Essence Burst, you channel either whatever, Disintegrate or Pyre.
Unravel. Make Unravel so that you can hit like, make it deal damage like a Searing Touch kind of thing, right? Like just something, we need just something else. We need something else whenever targets get low, because I can't even imagine PvP how frustrating that is. You got to play with someone with Execute, I assume. Right? Like
you have to play someone either with a hard CC, like the best comp for Evoker, well, really the only comp that you can really play is Evoker and Frost DK, and then Healer, because the Frost DK has all the CC to grip everybody in, and then you can just deep breath, drive by on top of that, and you pop all your bursts, and everybody's crowd controlled during those windows. But like, if you're just a Dragon Boy running around by yourself trying to make things happen, it's extremely hard for you because your Sleepwalk is on a 15-second CC or a 15-second CD. Like I can only imagine if Warlock CC or like Fear or Sheep was on a 15-second CD, the whole world would go on fire.
So wait, hold on. I got a question. So we were talking about defensives before, right? Obsidian Metal, that talent makes it so that you can't be interrupted, silence, pushback during it.
Correct.
Do you run this talent in PvP?
Sometimes, yeah, absolutely. If you want to just guarantee your burst, or I've used it offensively where I can just like hover in, pop it, and then get a sleepwalks, and then I can't get interrupted. Yeah.
Because like in theory it sounds good, but like the fact that you're having to use your defensive offensively just means that you don't have it for their go, right? So it just seems like it's maybe tempting fate a little bit with that one.
Yeah,
That's
it's a
why I
gamble.
never take it personally. I mean, we're already so squishy that I feel like, unless you're in a really like niche scenario where you've gotten the enemy team's defensives and you really know that this is like the push that's going to kill somebody, it's like what it ends up being is, I'm going to press my wall so that he can press his wall, and then, his wall is bigger than my wall, kind of thing. So I personally, I think that it's a nice PvP talent, and there's nothing wrong with it, but I don't feel like it's worth running in most scenarios. It's not a good exchange, especially in higher rated arenas where they're going to see that you just burn your defensive, and once they live through the go, then they're just going to turn on you and swat you like a mosquito.
I'll give you the best example that I could possibly do for Obsidian Metal. Picture you're playing against Mage, Warlock, or like LE Warlock on 12 round arena. I would pop this just so that I could spam heal myself to live because they have a 15-yard buffer range gap on me at all times. Like that is so I can't get kicked to just heal myself just to survive. That's just to give you an indication of like how how bad it is defensively in arena.
That was the most frustrating thing. Like when I was doing arena on Evoker was, if I queued into like melee cleaves, it felt okay, right? Because if you managed your hovers well and your group helped you out, like field view stuff like that, it felt pretty manageable. Frustrating, but manageable. If I queued into a caster cleave, I
over.
just lost every game because I have to play very aggressive, very offensively because I'm 25, they're 40. It's the same thing in like keys. It's like I don't know in raid as much if this has ever been the case, but like in a lot of key situations, there's a lot of abilities that mobs or bosses do where ranged players can just go stand at max range and ignore it. Like it won't hit them. Well, what do I have to do? I just have to eat it. I just have to deal with it. That sucks, right? I'm a ranged player. It's weird
Oh
to
yeah,
me. I
oh
don't
yeah.
know.
It's
Like,
hard.
oh, this warlock is just payphoning in the back, throwing chaos bolts at the mob, and ignoring every mechanic, and it's like, well, what do you do?
You don't do
Same thing
anything.
in arena, right? Like you're just stuck.
You're forced into a kind of a hit and run type strategy. You force it, with like a nullifying shroud, pop shroud, and then run in, try to get a triple drive by, pop all your damage, and if you kill them, great. If you don't, you literally just go behind the pillar, and because once they survive that, all they're gonna do is triangle formation around you and max range you a 15 yards buffer, and there's nothing you can do. Right? One's gonna spam fear,
You
one's
just
gonna
end
spam
up
sheep. You're done.
yo-yoing back and forth from the pillar. Yeah.
Or you find yourself, I don't know. Again, I wasn't great at PvP, but I always found myself like having to use hover, get the disintegrate going on the target, and then line of sight myself and let the disintegrate keep going through the pillar. Like situations like that.
Yep.
So it's like I have to use hover for that, which is kind of annoying. And then when I actually need it for a better reason, I don't have it because I'm using it to damage.
Yeah.
So hover in PvP felt like way more important in terms of planning it and like when you use it than it did in raid, and it's very important in raid too. But
Because
like,
if you know the fights in
PvP,
raid,
it was
you can
like,
time it. Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that like this conversation kind of stitches together a few of the threads that we've already brought up so far with like kind of the questions of like the mastery and the survivability, and even some of the like the rework components. I mean, I think like when you're looking at the mastery, for example, you have this immense modifier that's really difficult to balance in PvP. I mean, if you're looking at like our empowered spells, we'll call it like 100% modifier from the mastery, another 20% from Shattering Star, another 8% from the new set bonus, and then like 40% to Fire Breath and 15% to Eternity Surge from talents. So it's like you just have this immensely front-loaded damage profile, but then a lot of the way that our abilities work, I mean, aside from the fact that our range is really short, causality and the shorter range, like we're really encouraged to kind of stay in the fight and continually deal damage to get that cooldown reduction to actually to be close enough to hit the target. And it just kind of creates this awkward situation where we're really too squishy, especially versus the caster cleaves, like you mentioned. We're too squishy to stay in like that because we'll just die. But not only are we losing damage if we get out of the fight, we're not just losing damage from literally not doing damage, but we're also not getting our cooldown reduction. We're not getting any of these other like synergies from our talents, and we're just burning hovers trying to get in, like snipe a couple hits off, get back out, and it feels really bad, and it kind of just feels like there's not like an intentionality there. Like what is the goal playstyle?
There's no tools for you to operate in that. They really have to open it up.
Yeah, so it's like if their goal is for it to be like an aggressive, push in, stay in close kind of caster, then I mean that's fine. I think that'd be fun. But like, what's the exchange there? Like we need some more passive tankiness tools, like you mentioned earlier, Preheat. We need some way to avoid just getting constantly kicked on Disintegrate.
In a way to heal without having to give up too much, right? Because like if you need to heal yourself, it's like you give up burnout procs. That's kind of the only way to do that, right?
Right. Yeah.
And like other classes,
they reworked Ancient Flame. I was just gonna say, since they reworked Ancient Flame, you used to be able to kind of just spam heal yourself with Living Flames and get that perpetual cooldown reduction as long as you were healing yourself. And since they reworked it, now you basically get 2 per 30 seconds. So like using the burnout procs for healing is actually much more important this patch than it was previously.
Yeah, they also heal for less because Engulfing Blaze has been nerfed. Yeah, so like that's actually interesting because I feel like for PvE, Ancient Flame actually feels sick. Like I love this new talent, especially because like if I ever needed to make a minor adjustment, like I'll just hit Verdant Embrace or Emerald Blossom, right? As just like a free global, because the alternative is to Azure Strike, right? But yeah, I hadn't considered that. I guess in PvP that kind of sucks because you're losing a lot of your ability to spam yourself up. But yeah, I just feel like a lot of other classes that have off healing have like just way better off healing than we do, right? Like even melee classes, it feels like we're just kind of we're kind of stricken by the nerfs that we received in beta. They were just blanket nerfs, and now they're slowly bringing us back to speed, but it's still not enough, and it still costs a lot too, right? Like what we were saying before, like the class feels very slow. Like that includes the healing as well. Like you're very slow to heal yourself back up, because your spells just don't really heal you for that much, and they're also just very long. Like if you don't have a burnout proc and you're trying to Living Flame yourself to survive, you're probably gonna die before Living Flame goes off.
Oh, for sure you're dead. You have to have one of those tools.
3-second cast.
Yeah,
this is one of the big notes I had on the key side of things. Is people always ask me, it's like, why isn't Dev meta? Why isn't Dev doing higher keys? Like stuff like that. And one of the simple answers is our off healing sucks. You don't bring any off healing to the group that is meaningful, right? Like Shadow Priest, like VE, AG, Vigil, stuff like that, even in Arena, right? They hit this button and then they go ahead and they do their damage rotation. So nothing changes, right? And they just heal everyone. Rep Pallies too. They hit Divine Storm, they're healing the group the entire time. So all these other classes are doing their damage rotation and healing everyone. Whereas us, what do we have? You can Verdant Embrace someone for like 50k, 90k, 80k if it crits. You can Emerald Blossom that does nothing.
True.
Or you could like Living Flame spam one, or if you have a Leaping Flame, you can Living Flame everyone. It's like cool, does nothing, And to me, that's where we kind of fall behind a lot in a high key setting, is like you just don't offer any support really. You can take the rescue bubble, but like that's pretty minor.
Yeah,
right? Like these classes just get to do their damage rotation and heal everyone for free.
Yeah,
and
it
now you have
definitely
people
feels
doing
weird.
no healer keys because of it, right? So
It definitely feels weird because it seems like they want us to have like all this utility. We're supposed to be like a Swiss Army knife class, right? But then our tools are just so much weaker, and they're also way more intrusive, and they keep us from doing damage, like you said. On the point of Twin Guardian, You know, we were talking about like a short cooldown before. I know this would be overpowered for preservation, but I imagine honestly, one way to fix it would just be to have Verdant Embrace have Twin Guardian, right? Like if you could press Verdant Embrace and have the effect of Twin Guardian proc from your Verdant Embrace at 24-second cooldown, I feel like that would almost do what I need for, you know, being able to survive. It would be much worse than like Blazing Barrier, right? Because Blazing Barrier lasts a whole minute, and this would last 5 seconds. But it's a more I guess a stronger absorb, right? Having it tied with Rescue though just feels so bad because there's so many situations where like I know I need a Twin Guardian to survive, but I have to fuck with someone to do it, right? Like,
yeah.
and even if I do it in place, like there's a chance that I might, you know, turn them a little bit weird, and then they're gonna complain, or like maybe I flip someone backwards, or like there's just like a lot of different ways they can like get slightly fucked up, right? Or like just the fact that rescue takes so long sometimes to even go off in the first place, right? Like you'll rescue and then like a swirly will spawn on you because they always do. Swirly spawn every fucking 1.5 seconds, I swear.
Right.
And you
Yep.
rescue and you just kill someone with it, right? And then they're never gonna trust you to do that again. So it just sucks.
So I'll bring something to light that you're probably not even
mention
aware of.
disconnecting people in PvP.
I'll bring something to light you're probably not aware of is that you cannot rescue someone if they're rooted.
Huh.
So, oh yeah,
Or if you are rooted.
Or if you are rooted, or your teammate is rooted, you will not be able to rescue them, and you don't get any value from the talent whatsoever. Even if they're, I've lost games literally at the last second because a mage Frost Nova, my teammate, who was literally was touching him, and I was trying to rescue him for the shield for a save, and I couldn't do it because he's Frost Nova. It's just
Wait,
like
correct me if I'm
lost
wrong.
games because a warrior charges somebody and the charge roots them for 1 second,
Yep.
and then they get executed before they can rescue.
Mhm.
no.
Yep.
Correct me if I'm wrong. What happens there is you try to rescue them, and you have selected a spot where you want to end up. Right? You end up there, but they don't, and you don't get the bubble as well.
No, so it won't actually
Or-
cast.
Oh, it just won't. So
Yeah.
you just charge them and stop.
You don't even
No,
charge
it
them.
just doesn't work.
Just doesn't do anything.
Oh wow.
There's also I don't know if you guys have experienced this in PvE at all using it, but I've noticed a lot of like weird interactions with it in PvP where sometimes I'll like rescue someone and I'll move but they don't move, or they'll move.
Mhm.
So I've even had times where like they'll go where I targeted it and then I stay wherever they were standing. Or if warriors use Spear of Bastion, I've had that happen too, where I'll like yank someone out. But then I'll stay in the spear, even though I wasn't in it to begin with. Like I was never turned into it. Like there's just lots of weird positional interactions.
The ability used to be giga bugged, and you used to be able to like break the spaghetti code with it, and like if you got knocked up during your rescue, and then it would be hardwired to deep breath instead. So whenever the next time you press deep breath for like the next minute, what would end up happening is you would deep breath to the destination of your rescue with the person. So like you would
Whoa.
literally be doing like quarter stars. Imagine, right? Like so you're doing quarter stars. You like rescue someone at the start. You get like, let's say you hit Stormy, right? You're almost at the first boss. You're gonna like deep breath on the bridge to that first boss, right? And then you just deep breath all the way to the dungeon entrance, flying through buildings and shit with someone with you.
Wow.
And like, and your teammate will like usually you'll die, right? Because there's just like so much shit happening, and it's like the funniest looking thing ever. They fixed that bug, but it's still, yeah, it's very, the ability's very bugged still. It feels like.
Yeah, I wish it was honestly a shorter cooldown, but I know on the forums like early there was a lot of people complaining that, oh, this dragon's rescuing me. I'm not ready yet. I'm the tank and I'm not ready to do this next mob because he's
consent.
gripping me. He didn't give consent exactly. And you know, you can buy that toy that's like takes you like whatever immune to like annoyances, but I'm pretty sure that doesn't work on rescue. Like it works on life grip or leap of faith.
It works
I guess.
on rescue.
It does.
Yeah, the neural silencer. Yeah, it works.
Oh wow, well I better go back to that forum post and tell that guy all about it because
Because people in my raid use them because I used to grip them off the map.
I do love rescue for killing people. That is very fun.
Yeah.
I actually have
rescue
no
platform, it's
opportunities to
very
troll
easy.
people in arena because we're always on the brink of death and I'm just doing it just to stay alive. Like, but that's funny.
I think in PvP, rescue with Twin Guardian it's one of our strongest and most interesting abilities. You know, it's like a teammate gets stunned and you can move them LOS of the enemy team. It's really good. The shield is good. It is unfortunate. I've lost probably a dozen games overall to rescue disconnecting whoever I intended to save, and they'll get to a safe spot and then their health bar goes gray and then 10 seconds later they're dead.
Damn.
But I mean, I think it's a really, really good button in PvP. I would love to see the rescue shield have a little bit more more like use cases, I guess, or not. I don't want to say use cases.
I
but
love
more
Preheat's idea.
applicability. I think it would be. I think in PvP the Verdant Embrace thing might be a little too strong. It might be interesting if it was, I don't know, maybe tied to hover or something. I'm not sure. Maybe like it maybe at a partial effectiveness. I'm not sure where the line is in balancing there. But I mean, some like small kind of rotational defensive that we could, like a micro defensive, would be great for Evoker for sure.
Yeah, I think since it's like 5 seconds, it might not be too bad. But I definitely could see it. Like maybe it's like you get it at half value, right? Like just something there, right? Like just some other small button. Because I feel like Verdant Embrace itself is like, now that it's buffed, it's like it's okay, right? It's like a what 15%, 14% heal usually if it doesn't crit. But having the absorb shield on it means that like I could actually use it as a button to save my life, right? And right now I don't feel like it's ever gonna save me. I just feel like it's like sometimes I use it to move. Sometimes it doesn't even work right. Like I'll mouse over someone and then my character just like won't move at all and I won't even heal them, right? There's like some weird shit going on with it, but overall I think it's kind of fun. Like I think it's a neat button. I just wish it did something more than what it does currently.
Did you guys
I've only ever
have you
viewed it.
noticed that it's not reduced by haste like preservations is Verdant Embrace? Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Where are you seeing, Guess?
No, I said
I've
the
only ever viewed it as.
have you seen it like that or no? Verdant Embrace
I
is
didn't
a
notice
24-second
that,
cooldown for Devastation.
Yeah,
but
it's not reduced for Devastation, only for Preservation for some reason.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that is. Is that just like how it works? Like between, is that for just like the PvE side of it?
I don't know if that's intentional or not, but it's definitely not reduced. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think I've probably heard my Preservation friends tell me this because they would notice it more than we would. But yeah, that's kind of weird.
Sorry, Cass, I mean to cut you off. But what were you gonna say?
Oh, you're good. I was just saying, like Preheat said, like they aren't Emerald Blossom too. Like they aren't buttons that are gonna save you. I've only ever viewed them as, if I'm being honest, like, you know, there's some situations where I'll try and off heal a bit and help out, but in most cases, I have only ever used it to get a Scarlet for a damage buff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically just because it doesn't do much, right? Like the number is not high enough.
I'm curious.
And it also doesn't clear Thundering, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, you don't actually touch them. You get like close, but you don't quite make it all the way.
Yeah.
What are you
I'm
gonna say,
curious
Shambly?
how you guys feel about like some of the other elements down at the bottom, like Time Spiral and Zephyr. I feel like when I'm interacting with, like, I mean, I don't think I've ever even spec'd in a Zephyr. It's actually really useless in PvP. But with like Time Spiral, it's such a weird button. It reminds me of what was the Druid thing back in like Mob called, where it would like
Symbiosis.
Symbiosis, yeah, it reminds me of that, where it's like for some classes it's like, oh, this is really cool. Like when I'm playing with like a warlock in PvP, it's like, oh yeah, I can reset your port for a priest. Oh, I can give you another life grip. Those are like really, you know, crucial buttons to have that reset for. And then it's like, you know, you're playing with a monk, it's like, oh, well, I guess you could roll again, you know, like it's
Yeah, it's okay. So in raiding, Time Spiral is essential. It's in fact, like until they nerfed Rezaget a bunch of times, like early in progression, it was, you had to have Time Spirals to get through that fight with certain classes, right? So like, it's just an insane button. I love it too because like we benefit the most from it, right? Like hover is such an insane movement ability, and like getting extra free hover is fantastic. The only gripe I have with this town is that it's only 40 yards, and like it happens all the time where people just won't get it. And I don't know why, because I feel like even on like Broodkeeper, like people will complain that they didn't get Time Spiral or that I didn't Time Spiral, and it's like, no, I definitely pressed that button. You're probably just out of range. So that part is kind of annoying, but it's a fantastic button though. I love it. Zephyr though, Zephyr is so insane, right? Like there's some fights where for some reason like every ability is area of effect, and then there's other fights where like nothing is area of effect, but like Zephyr is just a very sick button. It takes a global, which is a downside, obviously, but the effectiveness of this button is just, it's crazy. And obviously, there's a lot of use cases for a Mythic Plus too. But like, I feel like if I press this button, it's more so for me in raid. Like I'm pressing it for myself in raid, and then if it's Mythic Plus, I'm pressing it like on a big AoE damage event. And honestly, like we were talking about, what's the boss, the bird boss in
Off.
yeah, Croft using Zephyr on like the fourth or shout or whatever it's called. That is that's pretty sick. It feels really good. Also in the Halls of Valor, like having that button, it feels really good.
Wow, it's even that strong, even at a 2-minute cooldown.
Well, so like obviously like 2 minutes is kind of long, right? But the fact that you can like push one back, that's the whole point, right? Because like you're gonna go basically the 5 on the first one, and on the second one you need to kill the boss before like you die, right? So like
Got you.
you're basically just giving your whole group like one extra one that you can use without having to use a strong defensive.
That's interesting. Yeah, this ability is actually just pure useless. In an arena, I mean, everything is more or less, direct damage, so it's never going to save you, especially in a 2-minute cooldown. But I could see how, this had a lot of value in the Mythic Plus and the raid environment, especially if you say that strong. I mean, 20% is, I guess if you know the damage is coming, you can mitigate it pretty well, right?
Yeah, you have to know it's AoE damage though, and like there's a lot of stuff that like might seem like it's AoE, but it actually isn't. And then there's also a lot of stuff that like seems like it wouldn't be AoE, but it is, right? But I'd say like on Rezaget, this button is insane because like everything in P1, which is by far the most deadly phase, at least it was early in progression, pretty much everything is affected by Zephyr. So you could kind of think of it as just like a 20% damage reduction cooldown.
Wow, that's really nice. So I believe we've gotten over all of the topics here. The last thing that I had was wish list / ideas. Mr. Shambly, I'm gonna let you cook. Anything you are wishing for?
I mean, I would I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I would just like to see a little bit more of like a specific design intention for I mean, I'll say devastation in general, with kind of the assumption that what I really mean is that I don't feel like in PvP it really has a niche. Like I mentioned earlier, like you kind of awkwardly are in this position where you don't quite have the range, you don't quite have the defensives, but then there's that feedback loop that happens with you continuing to stay in range and do damage. Which then gets weaker and weaker as the target's health gets lower. So it just doesn't really feel like there's this place where you're like, oh yeah, you want a Devastation Evoker on your arena team or whatever, because they bring this. Like really, it's like we just have that big AOE damage, which is why our only viable comp is with a DK, because they can grip all the targets together. Same. I don't really do a lot of RBGs personally, but I think they're pretty good in RBGs too for a similar reason. Just deep breath over the whole team. I mean, maybe that looks like giving us a little bit more control. Maybe it looks like giving us like a Mortal Strike effect. Maybe it looks like giving us, some additional survivability so that we can stay in the fight. Maybe it's a combination of those answers. But I would just like to see, the class really just get those tools and a defining niche for its role in PvP.
Amen, Mr. Kess. Anything that you're wishing for?
I'll answer this in PvP and PvE.
Sure.
I'll give my 2 cents for PvP. You guys might agree, might disagree. I'm not sure. In PvP, I would like to. I wish they would make it so that you could wall while you were stunned.
Amen.
I think most classes in the game can do something like that nowadays. So we feel a bit behind in that sense, in my opinion. Also, in terms of us being in the caster world, we have no like dispel protection, right? And I feel like most classes do. Like Shadow Priest, you get feared. Warlock, you obviously get chunked by UA, and so Fire Breath is like our only dot. So if you don't max rank it, I feel like you get no value out of it in PvP because they're just going to dispel the rank 1, right? And that's going to do nothing. So I think in PvP those would be cool. Just my 2 cents there. And then in PvE, specifically in the key scene, like a little bit of off healing would be nice. Whether it's a change of talents or they buff what we currently have to make it do a little bit more so it feels worth pressing those globals. That would be really awesome. Like Preheat said, that extra little defensive button would be cool down the road, I think. I think that would help the class a ton. But for me, the big thing is buffing or I mean, I think it might be better going forward already, but our sustained out of cooldown damage needs to be better. It needs to be more reliable, less RNG based. Like, if you walk into a pack and you don't get any essence bursts from, just Azure striking or stuff like that, your damage is pretty sad. And nowadays you could lose to a prop pally in a pull outside your cooldown. So I'd like to see some changes there. I think that's what hurt Devastation a lot this season is just our cooldown damage is great, AoE and single target, but outside of that, it's just not enough to keep up and perform with the meta specs. So I'd like to see that for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
Mr. Preheat.
Yeah, if you're doing AoE and you don't get essence burst procs, you're waiting like up to 5 seconds for your essence, or I guess like 4-ish, right? You got to get 2 of those for your pyre, right? So you're just
And you're
Azure strike,
sad.
Azure strike, Azure strike, Azure strike, Azure strike. That is the worst situation. Never want to be in that situation. It happens way too often. So yeah, I agree with everything y'all have said. I think the class itself is really fun. Like, I enjoy Devastation a lot. I think it's a breath of fresh air in this game, and it kind of feels like it belongs almost in a different MMO. And obviously there's like pros and cons that come with that, but overall it feels like it just hasn't had enough time to cook, right? It's just a little raw still. Obviously we have like undetermined niche where it's like we were saying before, you hit hard, you hit fast, you have insane burst, right? But also you gotta be careful because you get threat and you have no way to mitigate your threat. So stand on your fucking tiptoes, dragon, right? So don't do too much threat. So like my number one thing would be give us like a bronze themed spell that's like threat dilation, or make up some word, I don't know, I'm not good
Like
at that
Fade.
kind of thing. Yeah, like Fade or like Misdirect if you really want to go overpowered with it, because we'd probably have the most insane Misdirect in the game if we had one. But just like some way to mitigate threat for a little bit, because that to me is like the most annoying thing. And it's not just Mythic Plus. It's annoying in Raid too, because they keep designing these encounters where like ads run at you and like you just can't deal with it unless your tank's like a warrior or they're like on top of their shit, right? And they're good at dealing their burst damage when they need to. I can't tell you how many times in Intermission 1 on Rezagat I died because
Oh
I
my
pulled threat
God.
on the fucking blue zealot, the Frostborn zealot, whatever it's called. Like, you're supposed to kill that. I'm assigned to use my staff on it. I pop all my
Yes.
fucking CDs. I use my staff on it. I pull aggro on everything and I die. And I'm like, guys, like, what am I supposed to do here? Like, what am I doing wrong? Like,
Should have melted it.
yeah, like there's nothing I can do in this situation. So it sucks. Like, and you've got like your tail swipe, you've got your knockback, but like you can't react in challenging content in that amount of time, right? Like the GCD on it, you're gonna be dead before you can press the button, right? So like I would love to see just some way to like preemptively mitigate my threat. I would like to have some sort of small defensive cooldown to use. I would like to have some sort of utility to heal the group, like it seems like all these other classes have, right? That we just don't have. And also I would like to have just a little bit more sustained AoE. I think the best way to do that, like all of these things, is obviously to like rework the class tree a little bit, but also maybe we were talking about Titanic Wrath at the very start of this conversation. I feel like if there was just like one extra point to play around with in the tree, we could make so much more work. But like because there's not that point, it feels like even these new flashy toys that they want us to play with, we can't play with them still, right? We're just gonna have to leave them sitting there.
I feel like with the class tree too, there's like so much really interesting stuff that just doesn't really have a niche, Like I think a recall is like fundamentally really cool.
On global.
Yeah, but it's on the global.
Oh.
It's in kind of a weird spot. It's like, you don't necessarily want to, in PvE, I'm sure there's a lot of situations where it's like, oh, I'm going to recall back to where I deep breath. Oh, shit, a swirly just spawned right there. Like,
oh, yeah. Don't, dude, you just remind me. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
But like, that's something that in PvE, like when I was playing on beta, I was like, oh, this is so cool. I can like deep breath, over the kill target, stun the healer, sleep the healer, teleport back. But it's like you just can't get it. It would be really cool to if it like worked like mage displacement or something, where you could like teleport back to where you started your hover or something like that. You know. And that would really like help with our survivability and our mobility issues as well. And there's like Source of Magic is a cool idea. Like Impressing Roar is cool. You mentioned like making Unravel kind of an execute. Like there's a lot of stuff in here that I feel like if it just had like a version 2.0 would be really, really neat.
They need to make it okay. So Preservation has a talent where you summon like a clone and he like starts healing with you. It's like a bronze clone. They need to make Recall kind of like a choice node with the talent where whenever you press your deep breath, you just send it out, because it's just way too fucking annoying to have to use it yourself. Like the fact that ground effects like an earthquake effect, okay, on Nakud, second to last boss. The fact that that deals damage to me while I'm flying in the air is absolutely, it's like the dumbest thing ever, right? Like the tooltip literally tells you that you're flying in the air. Why are you being hit by lava pools on the ground, by like earth effects on the ground? I get it if it's like an AoE or if it's like a lightning bolt that's coming from the sky, but the fact that ground effects hit you is just completely idiotic. And like, I get that they don't have the technology to like properly deal with this kind of thing, but there should be something built into it to make you feel like you aren't just, you know, sticking your hand in the blender every time you go for a deep breath, because it feels dangerous. Like, if I'm thinking about deep breathing a pack, it's kind of like I'm approaching the garbage disposal, and I know I'm not supposed to stick my hand down there, but like I gotta grab what's down there, right? So like I'm making that decision every time I do deep breath. I'm like, can I fit in real quick, right? In and out, right? So yeah, just something else would be so helpful there, I feel like.
Either damage reduction, I feel like being completely immune is a little too broken, but either flat damage reduction, like 30%, I don't know, something, but, or just straight up, you don't take the damage from the swirl elite.
Just fling your bronze guy out. Yeah, the bronze guy, he comes, he flies, he does the deep breath, you know. That way too, we don't have to wait like 3 seconds during it.
I just want,
the travel time is so slow.
More on that, like my guildies, they were always like, oh dude, deep breath's so cool. It must feel so good to press that button. And I'm like, bro, this button is a I die button. Like, you don't understand. If I press this button, I am way more likely to become deceased. Like the way I use it is I jump into the pack and I deep breath out. Like that's how I have to use it to be safe. And also your stun happens faster doing it that way. So it's just better. But even still, it just feels like overly dangerous.
Yeah, something that was like, so yeah, go ahead. Because I got something to say. Go ahead.
I actually hate deep breath. Like, there's nothing about it I like. I don't like investing talent points into it. I think it's the most underwhelming 2-minute cooldown ability in the game. Like, it's a 2-minute cooldown, and to me, it just does nothing. It just creates problems. I don't like it. The only thing, in my opinion, that it has been good for is a stun. And I know in PvP, it's like, I think you guys like it a bit more, because I think you can like Shattering Star, Deep Breath combo, and it does a lot of damage.
It's one of our win conditions, really. Yeah,
but like for a 2-minute cooldown that adds an extreme like risk of dying, it's not it for me. I am very against it.
Well, in Arena we use it to get out of CC and stuff like that, but go ahead.
Yeah, it's good for that too. But I also had one more random wish list that I just thought of, and I actually think it's a very important one.
Okay.
I think, and I would like if they reworked our raid buff. The 15% cooldown on movement abilities to me just like does nothing. It has no value. It's not like, oh, I want to bring an evoker because we need this buff, right? Where it's like, oh, you bring a DH because you need the 5%. You bring a warrior because shout. You bring a druid because Mark of the Wild is just so good. Like our buff isn't in that same category, but it's a buff, you know? Like if it was something better, something different, I think, you know, people would maybe turn their heads at Evoker a little bit more in that way too.
I'm not sure that it has a cooldown, 15 seconds. If a Demon Hunter is sticking to you 24/7, you'll never have the buff up. Because he'll just consume magic. You'll never have it up. You know?
Yeah, that's true.
Which is really feels bad. But
I have never understood that. Like,
I don't know.
You're trying to give yourself purge protection. It's like it gets dispelled.
I think it's a preservation thing because one of their talents is that if you press a bronze spell, you get like the compression mechanic with I guess so, yeah. But I guess that's why they did it. But like as a whole, from front to back, from beta to now, like I just feel like it was completely rushed. Devastation was. The preservation was definitely what the entire thematic was really built around. Because there's so much depth, so much utility, so many synergies in those trees, on the preservation tree. And then you look at Devastation, and it's just like, oof, this is very, very low APM basic. I was just very surprised, like, that they shipped it in that state. I would just say that it's barely, like, a unique spec, right? It's just so very strange to me. Do you guys feel like it was rushed? Because I do. No?
I mean, I definitely do.
Yeah, I thought it was rushed.
It feels... It's just weird because, I mean, I wasn't there for like alpha. I don't remember exactly when I started playing it in beta, like in terms of the timeline. But during the I played for several months on beta, and I think the only two changes that happened with Devastation while I had beta access were that they changed the way that like Fire Breath worked and like Dream Breath and stuff to make them more consistent across empowerment levels,
Mm-hmm.
and they buffed the defensives, both of which were good changes. But I mean, like that's like two changes to a brand new spec, which seems wild to me. Especially when we're hitting the first major patch of the expansion and we're having to kind of rework the talent tree. It clearly was not ready for release. It's not like they're reworking Preservation's talent tree, right?
Right. Yeah, well, I couldn't agree more, and I just want to say thank you to all you fine gentlemen for coming together for this discussion. I just felt like it's really important to get both aspects, both game modes together to discuss all these things. So I just want to thank you guys for coming together for this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That's a
Yeah,
lot.
this was great.
Yeah,
Yeah, thanks for
a lot of
thanks
fun.
for organizing this, JD.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you for agreeing. I just really feel like truly it's really only going to get changed from your guys' perspective, like how it functions. So any input that we can give you from our side that can help you guys, with that process is worth it to me in my eyes. So I just want to thank you guys again for that.
I will say too, like I think I can see why from your like the PvP world that you would say maybe it was rushed. Like in my mind, this class, like Preheat said, Swiss Army knife. Like to me, we're designed for Mythic Plus. Like we're the only class in the game that has 2 AoE stops not tied to talents. Right, there are racial abilities. Think of the stuns you bring, the stops, cauterizing flame, the Zephyr, the time spiral. Like you bring all this group utility that really excels in like 5-man content or even a raid setting. But it doesn't seem like any of that gets the same value in PvP. So I could see why you guys would think
Yeah,
in your world that it's
reduced
rushed.
range,
like, I think it's
high
built for
cooldowns.
keys, built for raid.
It's
Yeah.
it's definitely for
Divide and
you.
Conquer.
Yeah, when they fix all the bugs on it.
Oh, how is that talent, by the way?
So the tooltip indicates it's supposed to be line of sight to enemies, like a smoke bomb, right? But it actually
sick.
it would be if it worked like that. But it actually gives, if you drop it and you're inside or outside of it, it's line of sight for you too. Now I've put in all the bug reports and everything. I've written on all the forums. I've done the Lord's work on it. And I've included video evidence of all the bugs with it. But overall, very sick talent. I mean, it looks great. The Ring of Fire, the damage is like 75k in total. But yeah, and putting up a wall for line of sight is going to be really interesting, especially in arena. But
Yeah, it's definitely going to be really powerful. And using it on beta, it was a lot of fun too. There were like it really whenever it was removed like a week before the class launched, I was like, well, there goes our win condition. It kind of felt like that was kind of the defining thing for how you would win a match in arena. So I'm really excited that it's coming back. It's slightly different than it was on beta, but I think it is going to be a really, really good change. I wish that all of our eggs were not in kind of the deep breath basket in PvP, but I do think it will create a lot of I think it'll open up some comp diversity for us, and that's always good.
yeah, I mean, to be honest, this is a new thing. It's got so much room for potential. I do love how it's the most fun spec for me to play by far. That's why I've been maining it since beta, and I really enjoy it. I'm just excited for what's going to come in the future. There's so many things they can do with it, right? Because of all the flight colors and how they can interact with that, and with the new patch coming out, we're going to get a little bit more, hopefully, Black Dragonflight, a little integration there. So that should be a lot of fun. But I don't want to keep you guys any longer, so I just want to thank you guys again for getting together for this, and then maybe we could do another one in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, I would
I'm
love
always
to.
down.
All right, guys. Thank you so much again for that, and yeah, have a good day on the rest of your stream.
Yeah, thanks for the chat, y'all.
All right, see you guys
Pleasure.
later. Peace out.
Take care,
Later.
guys.